Reflect in English podcast.
Welcome back to Reflect in English podcast. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Patrick. Hi, everyone.
Quick question before we start. Have you ever wanted to make a joke in English, opened your mouth, and then halfway through thought, oh no, what if nobody laughs?
Or even worse, what if people laugh, but not for the reason you wanted?
Exactly. But hey, the fact that you clicked into this episode probably means you do want to be funny in English, or at least you're curious about how humor works across cultures.
And that's brave, honestly, because humor is one of the hardest things to pull off in another language. It's like playing jazz. You need rhythm, you need timing, and you need to know when to improvise.
Today, we're unpacking all of that, not just how to tell a joke, but how to use humor as a way to connect with people, avoid awkward silences, and even accelerate your English learning.
Think of it as your backstage pass into the comedy club of English conversation.
Yes, and by the end, we want you to feel not only more confident with humor, but also more playful with English itself.
And hopefully, we can also encourage learners not to fear humor, but to see it as a skill they can develop. Because humor is not just entertainment, it's connection, it's confidence, it's showing you belong in a community. Let me start with a big picture idea. We often treat humor as the cherry on top of communication, right? Like, first you learn grammar, then vocabulary, then idioms, and only once you're advanced enough do you dare to joke.
True, but humor is more than decoration. It's often the glue. Think about meeting new people. You can be polite and correct, but until you share a laugh, you're still strangers.
Right. In psychology, humor is described as a social lubricant. It lowers barriers, eases tension, and builds rapport. For learners, telling or even just understanding a joke in a second language can be a profound moment of belonging.
I remember when I first told a joke in German during a student exchange. The moment they laughed, I felt I had crossed an invisible threshold. Like, okay, I'm not just a foreigner memorizing phrases, I can actually join in the playfulness of the group.
That's huge. And that's what we want to help our listeners achieve in English. Not necessarily to become stand-up comedians, but to avoid that feeling of telling a joke and hearing crickets.
Or worse, being misunderstood in a way that offends.
Exactly. So let's get practical.
Maybe we should begin with why humor doesn't always travel. Because humor is deeply cultural.
Totally. For example, in British humor, understatement is king. You might say, well, that went rather well, after a total disaster. And the humor lies in the gap between reality and the modest phrasing.
Whereas in American humor, exaggeration often carries the joke. A comedian might describe a slightly awkward moment as the most catastrophic end-of-the-world social disaster of my life.
Exactly. Same language, different humor strategies. So imagine learners trying to import their native humor style. It can feel flat or even confusing.
And let's not forget taboo boundaries. What's acceptable to joke about varies drastically. Some cultures embrace dark humor, joking about death or misfortune. In others, that would be deeply offensive.
Which is why a golden rule for learners is start with safe humor. Observations about everyday life, self-deprecation, or light wordplay.
Self-deprecation is especially effective in English. If you're a learner and you make a playful joke about your accent or about confusing words, you're inviting empathy. People will laugh with you, not at you.
Yes, and you also demonstrate confidence. Ironically, joking about your mistakes shows you're comfortable enough to laugh at yourself.
Exactly. Let's give an example. Imagine a learner says, "Sometimes I confuse beach and the other word." So when I tell my friends I love the beach, they look at me strangely.
That's a safe and funny self-deprecating moment. People will laugh because they recognize the classic pronunciation trap, and you win sympathy points.
Whereas joking about politics, religion, or tragedy, high risk. Leave those to professional comedians who know their audience.
Or better yet, just skip them in a second language until you've lived in that culture long enough to understand the nuances.
Okay, so we've covered cultural filters, but let's zoom into the structure of a joke itself. Why does rhythm matter so much?
Humor is music, essentially. A joke is built like a tiny song. Setup, pause, punchline. If you rush the pause, you kill the suspense. If you drag the pause, you make the audience impatient.
I like to think of it as breathing. The setup is an inhale, the punchline is an exhale.
Beautiful metaphor. And learners often struggle with rhythm because they're focusing so much on grammar and vocabulary that they forget the delivery.
Exactly. Sometimes, even if your wording isn't perfect, good timing can still land the joke. But perfect wording with clumsy timing, that usually flops.
Let's demonstrate. Here's a classic simple joke. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything.
Now, if I say it like this, why don't scientists trust atoms because they make up everything? Flat. The pause is missing.
Right. But if you say, why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. Boom. The pause creates anticipation and the punchline lands.
This is why listening to stand-up comedy or late-night shows is so valuable, not just for the jokes, but for the rhythm, the pacing, the music of it.
And it's why practicing out loud matters. Humor is oral art. You can't just write it, you need to perform it.
Let's move to puns, because they are everywhere in English humor. Headlines, advertising slogans, even everyday conversations.
Right. A pun is basically wordplay, where one word has two meanings or two words sound alike. The humor comes from the double interpretation.
Which is why they're so challenging for learners. You need both vocabulary depth and the ability to catch ambiguous sounds quickly.
Exactly. Take the classic coffee pun. I told my friend she was brewing trouble. It's funny only if you know brew refers both to making coffee and to creating problems.
Or the dad joke level pun. I'm reading a book about anti-gravity. It's impossible to put down.
Painful, but effective. The trick is that in English culture, puns are often admired for their cleverness, even if they make people groan.
That's an important cultural point. In some languages, puns might be seen as childish or lazy humor. In English, especially in informal contexts, puns are a badge of wit.
And sometimes, the cheesier, the better. You almost want people to roll their eyes.
True, but for learners, here's the catch. If your pronunciation isn't clear, the pun collapses because the whole joke relies on sound precision.
Which is why I advise learners, enjoy puns for comprehension practice first. Collect them, notice them, laugh at them. But don't feel pressured to produce them until you're confident with pronunciation.
Yes, it's like juggling. Watch how it's done before you start throwing knives in the air.
Good metaphor. But here's some encouragement. Even if your pun fails, English speakers usually admire the attempt. They'll think, wow, this learner knows enough vocabulary to play with the language.
Exactly. Humor mistakes are rarely catastrophic. In fact, they can be charming.
Let's gather some concrete strategies. Suppose you're an intermediate or advanced learner and you want to start experimenting with humor. Where do you begin?
First, observational humor, commenting lightly on everyday situations. For example, I came to London for the sunshine, And I'm still waiting.
Perfect. It's simple, culturally relevant, and self-aware.
Second, self-deprecation. Joking about your own mistakes or struggles with English. Something like, I thought I had mastered prepositions until I opened my mouth.
That's always endearing. Another strategy is exaggeration. English speakers love to stretch reality. If you say, "My vocabulary test was so hard, I aged 5 years in 1 hour," people will get the humor.
Yes, exaggeration is low risk and easy to adapt. And it doesn't depend on delicate cultural references.
I'd add one more. Borrowed jokes. It's perfectly fine to learn a few simple English jokes and reuse them, as long as you practice the delivery.
Definitely. And you'll notice which ones land with different groups. Repetition is part of the craft.
Let's also stress, avoid sarcasm at first.
Good point. Sarcasm requires a very fine grasp of tone and cultural context. Without that, people may take you literally.
Right. For instance, if someone shows you their new haircut and you say, "Wow, stunning," but in a sarcastic tone, it could backfire if they don't detect the irony.
Whereas if you just say, I look like a dictionary when I speak English, full of words but hard to carry, people will laugh safely.
And the great part is, every attempt teaches you something about rhythm, tone, and how your audience reacts.
I think we should zoom out again, because humor isn't just a tool for connection, it's also a confidence builder for learners.
Absolutely. When you succeed in making someone laugh, it's a massive confidence boost. You feel, I can do more than survive in this language. I can sparkle.
And even when you fail, you can frame it positively. If your joke doesn't land, laugh at the failure itself. That's humor too.
Exactly. Think of comedians. They bomb all the time. The difference is they don't run away in shame, they use it as feedback.
That's a liberating perspective for learners. You don't need to aim for perfection. Humor thrives on imperfection.
And here's the deeper lesson. Learning a language is not only about accuracy, it's about humanity. Jokes remind us of that.
Well said. Okay, Patrick, let's get even more practical. Our listeners might be thinking, great ideas, but how do I actually practice humor?
Good question. One exercise is retelling. Take a short, simple joke in English and practice telling it until the rhythm feels natural. Record yourself, listen, and adjust your pauses.
Yes, and don't worry if you feel robotic at first. Rhythm is like music. You only get it by repeating until it's in your body.
Another exercise, collect humorous lines. Watch sitcoms, late-night shows, or clips and write down short one-liners you like. Not to steal them, but to notice patterns, the setup, the pause, the punchline.
Right. And you'll see that many jokes use templates. For example, I used to, but then I. Once you recognize the skeleton, you can fill it with your own content.
Like, I used to be indecisive, but now I'm not sure. Classic.
Or, I used to translate every word, but now my brain just screams in 2 languages at once.
Perfect learner humor. And here's another exercise. Exaggeration practice. Take a mundane event from your day and describe it in the most dramatic way possible.
For example, the bus was 2 minutes late. I considered rewriting my will.
Exactly. It's playful, it's safe, and it trains you to stretch the language creatively.
I also recommend sharing mini stories. People love funny anecdotes, even if they're not technically jokes. For learners, these are often easier because you can rely on narrative structure instead of punchlines.
Yes, and you can practice them beforehand. Choose a small language mishap you had. Ordering the wrong dish, mixing up words, misunderstanding a question, and turn it into a story with a funny twist at the end.
And because it's based on your real life, it feels authentic. Listeners love authenticity.
Now let's address the elephant in the room. Fear. The fear of trying to be funny and falling flat.
Yes, that fear is strong. But here's the thing. Failing at humor is not a disaster. At worst, you get a polite smile. At best, people laugh at the attempt itself, which still creates connection.
Exactly. And laughter is contagious. Even if they're laughing because your joke was clumsy, you still win.
There's also a mindset shift. Don't think of humor as performance. Think of it as play. Children don't worry about being professional comedians. They just play with words and situations.
That's so true. And play is at the heart of language learning. If you treat jokes as experiments, every attempt is valuable, no matter the outcome.
Plus, remember, even native speakers bomb jokes all the time. If you've ever been at a dinner party where someone tries too hard to be funny, you know that awkward silence? It happens in every language.
Right. So learners are not alone in this. Humor failure is universal.
I'd love to touch on one last theme, humor as identity. Because when you can joke in a new language, you're not just speaking, you're showing your personality.
Absolutely. Think of how different you feel in your first language versus your second. Maybe in your native tongue, you're the witty one, but in English, you feel plain. Humor can bridge that gap.
Yes, cracking even a small joke is like saying, I'm not just a student here, I'm me. I bring my style, my humor, my quirks into this language too.
And that's powerful, because language learning isn't just about fitting in, it's about expressing who you are.
Exactly. Humor gives you agency. It says, I don't just respond, I contribute, I shape the vibe.
So if we had to leave our listeners with one message, what would it be?
I'd say don't wait until you're ready to use humor. Start small, start safe, but start now. Humor is not the final stage of fluency. It's part of the journey.
And my message would be, trust that laughter is universal. Even when your joke isn't perfect, your effort to connect through humor will be appreciated. People want to laugh with you.
Yes, humor isn't about flawless delivery. It's about courage and connection.
So go ahead, try that pun, tell that anecdote, exaggerate that bus delay. You might surprise yourself.
And remember, the goal is not to kill like a stand-up comedian. The goal is to connect, to share a moment of joy.
Beautifully said.
And with that, we'll wrap up today's episode.
Thanks for joining us on Reflect in English podcast.
Keep reflecting, keep laughing, and keep daring to play with English.
Until next time.